Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to the YouTube channel. I have a super special video for you guys today, and we are going to be reviewing the brand new DJI Osmo Action 2. Now, I've had the opportunity to play around with this camera for about a week now, so I've really put it through its paces, and today we're going to discuss everything this action camera is capable of, and if it's really the best action camera that has come out in 2021. And I know that's a big claim to make, but we're really going to explore that in this video to see if it lives up to that hype. Also, this video is sponsored, but not by DJI. This video is sponsored by OmniView Tech, and they are Canada's largest drone store, and they're the whole reason we were able to get this action camera early to review for you guys before anybody else. So if you guys live in Canada, definitely check them out. That's where I get all of my drone gear from. So huge shout out to OmniView Tech. But they did not have any impact or any sort of influence on this content, so you're still gonna get my unfiltered, raw, unbiased, real opinion on the DJI Osmo Action 2. So let's get into it and let's roll the intro. Now, the Osmo Action 2 has a lot to unpack before you even turn it on, and that's starting with the design and form factor. And this camera is tiny. Like, look at how ridiculously small this camera is. If you stack this up next to the original Osmo Action or even a GoPro Hero 9, for example, it's literally half the size. So in the size department, in terms of portability and how easy it is to use, this thing's already winning. Now, my favorite part about this camera is the magnetism. Is that even a word? The magnetic nature of this camera is very similar to the Insta360 Go 2 if you've ever used or heard of that camera. So it has magnets built inside, which means you can literally stick it onto any metal surface and it'll stick. Meaning that you can get this action camera into some really interesting spots and get some really cool angles that are not possible with other action cameras. Now, because of the magnetism, the magnetic nature of this camera, they also made it a modular design, meaning that you can add on other parts to this camera to kind of make it bigger. Now, I have the dual screen combo, and we're gonna get into what that means and what that is, but basically because of the magnetic nature and the modular design of this camera, if I bring the dual screen next to it, it just magnetically attaches on, and you can add different components to this camera, which I think is super cool. And all the accessories for this camera are also magnetic, meaning that the accessories for this are a real blast and a lot of fun to play with, and we're also going to dive into that in this review. Now let's turn on the camera and talk about some of its internal specs. So like any other action camera, it has a touchscreen on the back. It is small, but it's super responsive and very easy to use. The menus are very easily laid out, and this is where you make all your adjustments on the action camera when you're using it. The DJI Osmo Action 2 has a max resolution of 4K. Now, in an aspect ratio of 4:3, you can go up to 60 frames per second in 4K, and in an aspect ratio of 16:9 in 4K, you can go up to 120 frames per second. The highest frame rate on this camera for super slow motion is 240 frames per second, and that can be accessed through 1080p. That's the only resolution that frame rate is available in. In my personal opinion, 4K at 60 in a 4:3 aspect ratio is pretty fantastic for any action camera. This also has a 1/1.7 inch sensor and a field of view of 155 degrees, meaning that you can get super wide with this camera. And DJI really wants you to know that. They've also gone so far as to actually inscribe that information right on top of the camera on the front facing lens, so you can see all that information I just mentioned right there as well. It's also fixed at an aperture of f2.8, and that's pretty standard for action cameras, so nothing too surprising there. Because of the field of view, you have access to 3 different lenses. So you have your standard fisheye wide lens that you'll see on most action cameras. Now you also have access to the same wide lens with a de-warper, so it'll de-warp that fisheye effect for you without affecting the field of view. And then you have my personal favorite on this action camera, the super wide lens, which makes use of the full 155 field of view and it is really, really cool. You can pretty much capture anything you want in your entire frame. Now, those are the high level video specs on the DJI Osmo Action 2, and I'm not gonna dive too deep into the advanced settings for what's available on this camera in this video, because I do have another video on my YouTube channel that explains the best settings that you should be using on this camera to get the most cinematic footage possible out of it. So if you guys are interested in those deep settings, make sure you definitely go check out that video. But yes, it does have a color profile, a flat color profile, and it does have manual settings, so you can really play around with this camera and customize your footage to your liking. Now, these are just numbers. What does the actual footage look like? So all the footage that I've had playing throughout this video has been from the DJI Osmo Action 2, and it was all recorded in 4K at 30 frames per second in a 16:9 aspect ratio, because I knew that those videos were going up on YouTube. So you guys have been seeing the footage this whole time for yourselves. Now, at first glance, the video out of the DJI Osmo Action 2 looks really, really good. The 4K is crispy, the dynamic range is really good, and honestly, the colors are popping. I was impressed because I usually don't like the way Osmo footage looks, but I was really happy with the footage that came out of the DJI Osmo Action 2. I thought it was really, really good. I, however, did notice that the footage kind of struggled in low light scenarios. The camera did really struggle, even with that f2.8 aperture and that 1/1.7 inch sensor. The footage in low light just didn't look all that great to me personally, but I actually don't think that any action camera does that well in low light, so it wasn't that big of a complaint for me personally. Now, the DJI Osmo Action 2 also does time lapses and hyper lapses in 4K. For time lapses, they have this super handy feature where they tell you how long you should record the time lapse for, depending on what your scene is. So whether that's some clouds, some people, or a sunset. And I think that's an awesome feature to have and really, really handy, because I myself struggle and I don't know how long I should leave a time lapse on for it to look really, really good. And I think that's an awesome feature, especially for beginners. That's really gonna help a lot of people out. So thank you, DJI. I always appreciate helpful features like that. So the video score for me for the DJI Osmo Action 2 gets a solid 8 out of 10. Now let's talk about the photo capabilities of the Osmo Action 2. Now listen, I know most people are not going to be using their action cameras for photography, but it has that feature, so let's talk about it. Out of the Osmo Action 2, you're going to get 12 megapixel stills, and it's capable of shooting both in JPEG and in RAW. It also has all the manual controls that you're looking for, such as setting your white balance, your ISO, and your shutter speed, and the aperture, of course, is locked. Now, here are some examples of some photos that I took with the Osmo Action 2, and here are some more. Now, the images are really, really good for 12 megapixel action camera stills, but they still don't compare to the 20 megapixel photos that you're gonna get out of a GoPro Hero 9 or a GoPro Hero 10. Those action cameras are still the king in the photography category for action cameras. But I will say, the 12 megapixel stills out of this camera impressed me way more than they should have. If this was the only camera I had on me at a certain opportunity or a certain time to take photos, I would not be disappointed. I would be totally cool with pulling this out and taking some photos with it. But because it doesn't stack up against the 20 megapixel photos that come out of the GoPros, the photography and the photo aspect of the DJI Osmo Action 2 gets a 7.5 out of 10 from me. Next up, we're going to talk about one of the most important facets of any action camera, and that's stabilization. With the Osmo Action 2, DJI is releasing their latest stabilization technology, which they're calling Rocksteady 2.0. And this is going to be the first camera to feature that. And I wore this camera and used it in a bunch of different scenarios. I did a bunch of random things. I went for a run. I even wore this while playing volleyball. And honestly, Rocksteady 2.0 kills it. But that's to be expected in 2021. Action cameras are supposed to have incredible stabilization for every single day tasks. Now, I have a bunch of footage playing as I'm talking of the things that I mentioned that I was doing with this camera, and you're gonna see the clips side by side with Rocksteady 2.0 turned on and turned off so you guys can see the real difference. Now, in recent years, people have been really enamored with the stabilization of action cameras, but not for everyday tasks. They've been enamored with it due to one reason, and that's FPV. Now, I know a lot of people are gonna ask, how does this camera perform on an FPV drone? Well, you don't need to wonder, I did that test for you. I took this camera and I put it on this. This is a ProTech 35 and it's my real first FPV drone other than the DJI FPV drone. And I've been flying this thing for only about 2 weeks. So if the stabilization on this can make me look good, trust me, it can make anybody look good. So now you guys are seeing some footage of me flying the FPV drone, the ProTech 35, with the DJI Osmo Action 2 strapped onto it. And you're gonna see the side-by-side clips of me flying this drone with Rocksteady 2.0 turned on and turned off. And I'll be honest, I was not expecting the stabilization to perform well because I'm so biased and I love real steady go, but I was actually blown away. The stabilization on this camera was fantastic and I was really not expecting that. I think this is an excellent competitor to GoPro's Hypersmooth, and if this is the only action camera that you have to fly FPV drones, you don't need to worry because the stabilization is actually top notch. I completely love the stabilization out of this camera and I was definitely not expecting that. So for me, the stabilization on the DJI Osmo Action 2 gets an amazing 9 out of 10. Next up, let's talk about the waterproofing on the DJI Osmo Action 2 really quick. So it's rated for about 10 meters of depth, but it's very important that you understand only the camera module is waterproof, meaning if you have the power combo or the dual screen combo, the modular attachments cannot go underwater. Only this part is waterproof. Now, because of COVID, all the pools in my area are actually closed, so I didn't get a chance to go swimming with this and test it how I really would have liked to, but I did fill up my bathtub with water and I dunked my head inside and I recorded all of that with the Osmo Action 2, and here's a clip of that right now for your entertainment. And as you can tell from that clip, the underwater footage really looks good also. Now there's also one more really unique feature on the DJI Osmo Action 2, and that's the fact that it has voice control. So you can actually give it simple commands like start recording and it'll start recording, and you could also stop it by going stop recording and it'll stop. So it's not really a feature that I would use, but it's something that's on there and I think it's pretty cool. And also you have to turn on voice control manually, and that's done so just because you don't want the camera to just accidentally start recording if you say like some random phrase or anything like that. And that's a really good feature, and I appreciate that level of customizability to be able to turn it on and turn it off if you don't want to use that feature. Next up, let's talk about my personal favorite part of the Osmo Action 2, and that's actually the accessories. So the dual screen combo comes with this awesome necklace or pendant or whatever you want to call it, and you're actually supposed to put it through your shirt, but I have my mic here so I'm not going to do that, but I do have some B-roll playing showing you guys how to actually use the pendant and how to kind of put it together. But basically what you do is you take this magnetic piece off of the pendant, and like I mentioned earlier, all the accessories are magnetic and they make use of the magnets inside the camera, which I think is awesome. So this piece just snaps on magnetically, and then you take your camera and that's it. You just pop it on the pendant. Now you have this awesome first person point of view perspective that has become so popular on TikTok and Instagram. You see people doing these kind of shots all the time, and I just love having the function or the ability to use both of your hands when you're recording and having that really unique perspective. It's actually the reason why I almost bought an Insta360 Go 2, but hey, the Insta360 Go 2 can't record in 4K, and while the Osmo Action 2, it can. Now let's talk about the main accessory that ships with the dual screen combo, and that's obviously the second dual screen accessory. Now, I love this because you can use it to kind of vlog on the DJI Osmo Action 2, and it helps you frame yourself or your subject or whatever the camera's facing towards, if it's facing towards yourself. And hey, it's 2021. I think every single camera should have some kind of feature like this. And because it's modular, you can take it off and put it back on and only use it when you think you're going to be vlogging or you need to have the camera facing yourself. So I really appreciate that. I can take this off and make use of the camera's incredibly small size if I'm not not gonna be vlogging. And if I wanna vlog, I put this right on, I can see myself, and it's very, very easy to frame myself. Now, I did try vlogging with the Osmo Action 2 just to test out the audio and what that looks like. So here's a clip of that right now. Yo guys, what's up? This is a test of me vlogging on the brand new DJI Osmo Action 2. And honestly, I'm using the dual screen right now and I'm loving it. It's awesome. I can see myself perfectly and I think the framing is pretty good. You guys let me know what you think in the comments below. And also let me know what you think of this audio. This is the native audio on the DJI Osmo Action 2. And based on that clip, you guys can see it's definitely usable for vlogging. It's definitely something that I would consider using just because of the size aspect of it. Like, it's so small and so easy to use. Like, I would not mind vlogging on this at all. So yeah, vlogging on the Osmo Action 2, definitely usable, and in my opinion, pretty good. Also, one more accessory I quickly want to touch on that comes with the dual screen combo is this awesome sticky mount magnet type of mount. So basically you just put your camera right on top of here, you take this little cap off, and you can stick this to any surface and it is really, really strong. Now, the cool part about it is that if you wash the bottom with water, you can reapply the sticky nature of this mount and you can put it on a new surface, which I think is awesome. And if you're dealing with any non-magnetic surfaces that the camera can't natively stick on, this mount is awesome for getting the action camera into basically any place that you want, which I think is a dope accessory to include with the box. Now, at some point, somebody is definitely going to ask, how strong are the magnets? Well, let me explain. I actually think DJI has done an amazing job of thinking through the design of this camera and how accessories snap onto it. Now, with the exception of the pendant, every single accessory that comes with this camera attaches magnetically and with hooks. So I'm gonna have some B-roll of that playing right now just so you guys can see a closer look of what that looks like. But basically, there are these two hooks around the camera body. So whenever you put on anything magnetically, it actually latches onto those hooks through the little slits in the body as well as magnetically. So if I try to pull apart this camera as hard as I want, it's not gonna come apart. Like, I would literally have to break it for it to come apart. Instead, for you to be able to remove the whatever component or whatever accessory you've added to the camera, you actually have to release the two clips pushing down over here, and then you can pull it off. So DJI has a failsafe on top of the magnetic function that it has attached to its camera, and I think that's absolutely genius. Even the mount that I used on the ProTech 35 when flying the FPV drone, also this mount also comes with this combo, so you don't have to go out and buy it separately. But basically, it has the hooks. So even when I was flying, I was pretty confident that even if I crashed the drone or anything like that, like, the camera was not gonna go flying like 100 yards or something like that. Like, I'm trying really, really hard, I don't know if you guys can tell, to pull it off, and the camera is not coming off. So again, I have to unlatch using the two hooks and then I can pull it off. And I think, honestly, absolute genius, and really good on DJI for making sure that our camera is safe when we're using all these different accessories. So for me, accessory design for the DJI Osmo Action 2 gets an amazing 10 out of 10. Now let's get into the bad, because not everything about this camera is just amazing. Now you're gonna notice that this camera is pretty closed bodied, meaning that you don't see any ports on it and there's nowhere to really put a memory card. And that's because it has an internal memory of about 32 gigabytes. So now you're probably asking, what if I want to charge it? Or what if I want to use an SD card? How do I do that? Well, the answer is you actually can't. You actually have to use this. You got to use the dual screen or the power combo attachment to sort of connect to the camera. And this piece, you're going to notice, does have a slot for a memory card as well as a USB-C port for you to charge. So anytime you want to charge or use your memory card, you actually have to have this on. Now that means is if I remove this and I'm just using this camera I can't use any SD card, meaning I have to rely on the internal memory. Now, that's pretty annoying, and I don't know why DJI did that. It might have been due to the waterproof housing or whatever, because of the size of the camera. They wanted to make sure that they could maintain that waterproofness for up to that 10 meters depth. So you have to sacrifice somewhere there, right? And they just chose to go with the SD card slot and the USB-C port. And that's pretty annoying for me personally, because if I'm using the pendant for those POV shots, or if I'm sticking this on my FPV drone, I'm only using the camera module, meaning that I have to rely on the internal memory. Now, it's good for about 30 minutes to like 45 minutes of recording, which is fine. It's not ideal, honestly, but it's something that if you're gonna get this camera that you're gonna have to live with. The only reason that I can look past it is because I love the size. I love how small it is and how compact, and all the amazing angles that I can get using the necklace and just sticking it into random areas. So for that sole reason, I'm willing to let it go. But for me personally, the body design gets a low score of 6.5 out of 10, just because I need those ports. I need expandable slots because I do a lot of back-to-back and batch shooting. So for me, that's definitely a hindrance. Also, this camera doesn't come with any external or removable batteries, meaning that every single time this dies, you actually gotta charge the whole thing. So that's the only downside for me. The body design itself just gets a low score because I like to have those ports and those slots, but it's not the end of the world. You just have to know what you're getting yourself into, and you have to be okay with dealing with those limitations when using the Osmo Action 2. So finally, as we start to wrap this review up, who is this camera for? The DJI Osmo Action 2 is basically an Insta360 go-to supercharged that can shoot in 4K. It's as simple as that. So if you've been interested in that camera, or if you've been waiting for a high quality, high resolution camera that you can get those POV shots with and that has magnets in it, I would definitely go pick this up today. If you've been holding on to the original Osmo Action waiting for this one, I would go pick this up today. This camera is light years ahead of the original Osmo Action, and honestly, they don't even compare. This camera is literally 1,000 times better than the Osmo Action 1. Also, like I mentioned throughout this review, the size of this camera is a huge advantage. So if you're someone that flies smaller FPV drones that require naked GoPros, meaning you had to strip them down, forget all that. You don't need to strip down GoPros anymore. You can just use the Osmo Action 2. The weight and the size are amazing. And like I mentioned earlier, the stabilization on Rocksteady 2.0 is really, really fantastic. And that's it for this video, guys. That's the brand new DJI Osmo Action 2. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that review and you learned everything you need to know about this camera in case you're interested in picking one up today. Now, if you guys enjoyed this video and if you learned something new, definitely leave a huge like at the bottom of the page. Smash that like button. It really helps out the video. If you guys are into drones, photography, and you want to get more of that, first look, sneak peek stuff on DJI stuff on the first day, then subscribe to this channel. I would really appreciate it, and it would mean a lot to me. That's all I have for this video though. I'll see you guys in the next one, and until then, keep creating.